mean, my take on it is the progressives are split on this. You have the folks who are never going to forgive her for being a prosecutor who, put black and brown people in jail as someone who was not very progressive. And then you have some people who feel like that stance has been like overblown and hasn't been, isn't like a nuanced stance, and that like what Emily was alluding to, they're not taking her current policies into account, and that it's just like this hardline stance that they're taking, and then people kind of enjoy like showing how progressive they are by hating on Kamala Harris.
Well, I think like Misha and I were having this conversation earlier today, oddly enough, and I think that and the point that Misha made about it is that a lot of people who are police abolitionists, they see prosecutors or anybody who has ever been a prosecutor as part of law enforcement, which by default makes them the ops.
Sure.
And that's the problem that a lot of people have with Kamala Harris, especially people who, have problems with law enforcement as an institution.
Well, it does make her the ops.
That's what I'm saying. That's the point that Misha made, is that like, because she was a prosecutor at one point, that like it automatically in the eyes of a lot of people,
because she was a DA.
One of them.
Yeah, because she was a DA. So here's my thing. At the risk of what's the word? Contradicting myself. Like if you were a DA, if you were someone who was prosecuting people, I think you'd have to go pretty far to show that you've really moved, like that the bar has moved like really far to the left. Like she would have to like be like absolutely denounce those positions, be on some abolition type stuff. And I don't think she's like, I think it's been like, I don't think there's been like a huge like, no, that stuff is totally wrong. Like I'm totally on the other side of the issues.
She's just been talking, you're right, she's just been talking about like the run-of-the-mill Black Lives Matter stuff that's in whatever that people seem to think is in political vogue right now.
The stuff that you think is going to make you electable.
Exactly.
Right.
But here's my point. Here was what Misha and I were saying earlier too, is that yes, anybody who's ever been a DA or a prosecutor is, quite frankly, yes, they're law enforcement, they're the ops, and like, yeah.
I don't say so much for prosecutors, but certainly, the DA is referred to as the top cop.
Yes, but I kind of use that. Bear in mind, I use those terms interchangeably sometimes, but like, I think that like people see it as like, it's not that she's not like one of them per se, so much as that like, and this is just my own personal honest feeling, is that I feel it's distressing, it's obnoxious, I can't stand it myself, but I feel like that that it's unrealistic to expect that we're gonna completely get rid of law enforcement, no matter how much we want it. To get rid of it, there's always gonna be some form of law enforcement out there, because there's too many people who oppose getting rid of them.
But nobody wants to get rid of law enforcement.
But that's the way that they're interpreted. Like,
that's the way the people who are against defund the police are. That's the narrative they're putting out.
Look, you're preaching to the choir. Like, I understand what defund the police means, but I do agree that it's a misleading term. But what I'm saying is, would you rather, if given a choice, would you rather have like a Kamala Harris in office or a Joe Arpaio? That's my point.
Well, I mean, those are very far
very
choices.
extreme examples, but
Yeah, I mean that's
that's
an
my
extreme.
but
That's an
that's my line of thinking. If like
okay. So let's
I
bring that.
don't want to, and I want to hear what Sam's opinion is on this, but I don't want to choose a Biden. I'm already mad I have to choose Biden. I feel like it's salt on the wound if you put Kamala Harris on that ticket. That's my personal feeling. I don't want to, that's, to me, it's like doubling down on BS.
And are the other VPs running Arpaio-like? No one running is Arpaio-like, right?
well, no, but my point
No one's
is
really running.
no one's running. But my point is, are any of them any better? They all have their own.
If
Other,
Barbara Lee was running, she'd be the shit. But I don't think
she's not.
I don't know that she's running yet.
I mean, they definitely have their own problems, but they're the one that's most relevant to me, the most glaring. You know, I like Keisha Lance Bottoms. There's a couple people, Stacey Abrams, that yes, they come with their own problems, but Kamala Harris's problems made her not electable. It's the reason why she didn't get the nod. One of the reasons why she didn't get the nod.
But here's my point: how is Val Demings any less objectionable than?
Well, I didn't say Val Demings. I didn't say Val Demings.
No, but
I
she
said,
is in the mix.
and if that comes up, I'll be opposed to that too.
Why,
Okay.
what's up with Val Demings?
She was the police chief of Orlando, Florida, for a long time.
There's another person running that's kind of problematic that was in the Obama administration, and that was like partly responsible for the Rwandan genocide type shit.
Susan Rice.
Oh yes, Rice.
Yeah. I mean, I like Keisha Lance Bottoms.
So what do we know about her politics and stuff? What do we know
what
about
you're
her?
saying is that if it was that you would say the same things about Val Demings.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay. That's where I'm double checking because one can't be like, I guess, because like let's say hypothetically, like if you were to like, if one was like to poo-poo Kamala Harris but be okay with Val Demings, to me that would be talking up two sides of your mouth.
So for me, I'm opposed. Like, it's a concern to me that Black people get killed by cops. The incarceration rates are a concern to me because a lot of people are in prison that probably don't belong in prison. I don't have a problem with prisons. I don't have a problem with police. With the things that are going on in the current landscape of our country, especially for the last decade, I am very wary of a ticket that has Joe Biden and Kamala Harris on it. Both of them. I already have to accept Joe Biden.
I mean, I don't know. Like, I personally, like, I just don't think that she's as bad as some of the rest of them. Like, but that's just me. Like, I actually don't think she's as bad as Biden.
I mean, for me, it's like we had an Occupy Wall Street movement, and then the slap in the face is after Occupy, we get Donald Trump. We get the 1% as president. And now we're going through all this unrest based upon, you know, police overstep, overreach, and what have you. And then we end up with Biden and Kamala Harris.
I mean,
it's a lot.
Like, you know what I mean?
It's a lot, yeah.
But I guess, like, I'm very confused as to, like, and I mean, I know there are, like, a few stories, but, like, coming from the other side, like, what did people expect her to do as a prosecutor, to, like, unlock all the doors and let people who were actual criminals out of jail? Like,
No, but you don't have to. No, but you don't have to do that to not be an overzealous prosecutor.
But but here's my point. Like, what's the evidence that? And I'm asking this as a legitimate question. Because I really legitimately don't know. What's the evidence that?
So
she was overzealous.
She, and to her credit, and something that you spoke on already, she publicly spoke against how she operated, and this is like last year, how she operated as a DA. she didn't obviously detract her, from doing her job, but she publicly, I mean, she's apologized. She's recognized, especially in her, was it San Francisco? Where was she at?
San Francisco.
Yeah,
Yeah.
San Francisco. California, there are a lot of people in jail in 3 strikes, which probably, 3 strikes probably shouldn't even be a thing.
Which I think is stupid too. I agree with that.
Somebody shouldn't go to jail on their 3rd strike for having a joint.
Yeah.
Well, no, especially not when that same person would get sent home with a slap on the wrist if they're white. But
Ish, I want to ask, do you think her apology was sincere, or do you think she was just playing the game?
So, I'm glad you asked that, Sam. And I don't want to be such a cynic, but it goes back to, I can't give people with power the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
So I believe she said everything that she said and everything that she's doing. And this doesn't mean that she isn't doing it for the right reasons. But I certainly believe the primary reason was she was going to run for president.
Yeah.
But here's my thing. If you can't give anybody with power the benefit of the doubt, to me, that means no one's worthy to vote for.
Well, I mean, you kind of have to take what you get, right? You kind of have to take the example that they've given us. You see what I'm saying? Which is the reason why so many people are hard on Biden, because he's given us an example. That doesn't mean he won't get in office and be a great president, but we absolutely critique him because of the example he has set.
And here's my thing. I think that that people need to hold her feet to the fire. Kamala Harris is, and I'm not denying that. But however, I kind of feel like that, I'm not gonna lie, I'm exhausted with critiquing everybody, because I feel like that everybody has faults. Anybody who you're gonna put in office is gonna have faults. At the end of the day, at the end of the day, what matters is, hold on, let me finish. The end of the day, what matters is not who's in office, but what we do as individuals locally on the ground.
So I understand that you're exhausted, and I wish that my life and the life of many Black people historically, I wish we could breathe. And what I mean by that is, it doesn't matter what side of the fence you're on. History has been about cultivating the Black vote based upon promises that you never follow through with. Period. Democrat or Republican. That's just kind of what it is. So I always have to critique.
I mean,
because
I agree that I don't have a right really to say that I'm.
No, you do.
Exhausted.
You're a citizen of this country, and
Yeah, but I haven't had to deal with what Black people have had to deal with.
Yeah, but you've had to deal with whatever you had to deal with being a woman. You had to deal with whatever that you have to deal with in your individual life and we're, as Americans, we all have to deal with different things. We all have different perspectives. We all have different burdens.
So
right?
it's like what you're saying is that while I might have white privilege per se, I still don't have male privilege. I still don't have straight privilege. I still have mental illness issues to deal with, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
There are certain things that absolutely matter to you and should matter to you when it comes to politics and voting, and these things should matter to you. So I'm not diminishing it by saying what I'm saying at all.
Here's the thing about the criticism. We know whoever gets in there is going to disappoint us on some level anyway. So it's
no one's perfect.
Well, yeah, because no one's perfect, but people are even less than perfect.
Yep.
So we might as well get the criticism out now and try to bang out the best possible prospect we can, because even that person's going to disappoint us.
Mhm.
So like we don't have the luxury of being sick of like critiquing people after like, you know, all the bullshit that we've seen. So like we need to like hammer it out now, because whoever gets in there is still not going to be, you know, what we're eventually going to want.
Well, and I
That's
think
true,
I
and we
think
bring and we. Excuse, I would like to say something, and I think it's also very important that at this point we have to come to terms with the flaws of whoever it is that ends up running, because we have to be able to accept those flaws if we're going to get enough support behind this person to vote for him to make sure that he beats Donald Trump. And unfortunately, that is a big problem that the left had over the past 4 years. This obsession with purity when it comes to politics, like not having the exact right view, the exact politically correct view on every single issue, and it's really weird. It's really sabotaged us in terms of because not enough people have shown up to support those candidates if they don't follow the party line on every single issue.
Yeah.
Well, I think. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go on. I wasn't. I was just gonna say that was a good point.
I think that like.
Thank you.
I think my thing about it too is like when I say I'm exhausted is like, yes, I think I could see where everybody's coming from, that like no one's perfect. Everyone's gonna disappoint somebody in some way, because like that's just life. Like and I don't want to marginalize or minimalize the legitimate upset or pain that people feel. However, that being said, and this is maybe just the fact that I'm like an extremely over pragmatic, over logical person speaking here, but like to me, I feel like that like talking and I guess complaining about who might be nominated or complaining about the candidate, and maybe critiquing and complaining aren't necessarily the same thing, but just talking about what we don't like about the candidate is not as productive as planning how we're going to mobilize when they ultimately do get nominated or elected, because I feel like that just critiquing what we don't like is acting like that we can control the outcome when we can't. So we should focus on what we can control, I guess, if that makes any sense.
That makes sense. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
We got to be more.
I'm-
We got to be more strategic.
I'm certainly gonna vote for Biden, no matter who he chooses.
Yeah. And Harris has been the front runner for a long time.
Yeah.
Probably because she was the most prominent person in the field with her particular mix of demographics.
Realistically,
And
too.
yeah, so I just feel, though, personally, she has the optics that they want for that position, and I'm not really sure why they think that that's going to get all of that they think that she is going to be the person who's going to like get a lot of the non-white voters, even more.
I don't know if it's that so much, even though like I feel like that like she might peel more women away from ass space that's in there.
What's
Like,
wrong with Warren?
I would prefer Warren, actually, but like she's done something to piss off the left wing, and I don't know what anymore. I mean, a lot of people don't trust her because, like, much like Hillary, she was at one point a registered Republican, like, and Barry Goldwater supporter. But like,
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, 50 years
yeah,
ago.
but people still bring it up.
Yeah.
I don't.
Well, the stuff that I think that's more relevant is I think I don't know. I think some folks are skeptical because she like kind of like flipped on some like major policy issues that were like the crux of her campaign. So I think some people are like wondering if she can be trusted there, and then her not like supporting, Bernie and stuff like that. I think people are like, those two were supposed to be tight. I think, there's some different trust issues there. I mean, some of it's demographics too.
Well, and I think that like this is a reason why I could never be. I feel like I could never be a good politician because in some ways it's like I'm too honest and too wanting to do the right thing because I
Yeah.
feel like eventually I feel like 3 or 4, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this against her because I love AOC, but I feel like 2 or 3 years down the road, even AOC is going to make a decision that's like, what's the word I'm looking for, that's objectionable to us or to somebody else just because she has to keep her status.
Me and Mike
Right.
had this conversation some months ago before I even met you guys, and we were talking about AOC. And remember, Mike, I was saying to you, at some point in time in her career, she's going to come to a place where she's going to have to make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, we were having that conversation?
Yeah.
It's just going to happen. And, we may find the decision she makes questionable.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I remember that conversation.
But it's like, that's why I feel like I could never be a politician because I feel like politicians are forced into this corner of like constantly choosing what's best for everybody versus choosing what's best for their career so that they could stay there in order to help everybody. And that's kind of like, I mean, that's like that in any position. Like I've had to do objectionable things like as a teacher, in my opinion, in order to keep my job.
Right.
But like,
I appreciate the honesty there.
like I've had to like,
Don't say it on live. You are still the teacher.
We're recording too.
Yes, but I think this anecdote is like, I think this is a safe anecdote. Like, I think I might have already told the story actually once on camera, so it's probably too late anyways. But there was a time last year, like when a weed deal went down in my classroom. Like, on a personal level, could I really give two shits what they're doing with their private lives? No. Should they, like, do I have to follow school rules? Yes. So I had to report it, and I had to report it because I thought
selling weed in school certainly isn't part of your private life.
No.
Well, no, that's my point. Like, I guess, how do I put it? I had to report that they were like selling weed in school, but I don't have a judgment on like if they want to smoke weed at all. That's their personal business. But the fact that they brought it into school and like they kind of backed me into a position where I was ostensibly forced to snitch on them in order for me to be able to continue to stay there and teach them. And,
well, right, it was on camera.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like I kind of, when I say do some objectionable things, like I shudder at the idea of like doing anything or reporting anything that could possibly get a kid suspended.
Yeah.
Because I know that like there's a problem with disproportionate suspension of Black and Latinx students, but if they actually do something wrong and end up getting suspended for it, I've got to say something because I do have to snitch on them because like I'd like to keep my job because I'd like to still be there when they come back from suspension. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
Like,
And also if because if they do something in school that's not appropriate, they, you know, it should not go unnoticed.
exactly. But I mean, like, I think the key issue there was not the marijuana. Like the key word there, the key problem there was not the word marijuana. The key word there was the word school. Like,
Yeah.
this is not a school appropriate thing. But I think it's not only that, like, I feel like, you know, even more so on a higher level, like, I've had to teach, it's come into like how I've taught too. Like, I've had to teach to the test, like, with standardized testing, and had the kids complain and moan and say, why do we have to learn this? Why do we have to learn this? And I really don't have a legitimate answer for them other than it's on the test, but I have to have them pass the test in order to like keep my job.
Yeah. Yep.
Even though I know standardized tests are really bad
Mm.
for the Latinx community and the Black community.
Well, I know here in Buffalo, the purpose of them is really to test the teacher's ability to teach
Yeah, it's to test
information.
us, and they completely like disregard any of like the socioeconomic factors that go into how well the kids do on the test.
Yeah, it's that crazy like Terra Nova testing and you know all of this stuff that's designed to teach the to evaluate teachers' ability to teach children.
Or like another one, like this actually spirals back around to, I'm sorry if I'm hogging the floor, but this actually spirals back around to the topic of Kamala Harris. Like, another thing that makes me feel really bad is, like, as a teacher, is reporting parents like for truancy or supposed neglect, because it honestly, knowing what, and I apologize in advance, Sam, because I know you know probably a fair amount about this,
Yes, I do.
but I hate, unfortunately, I've never had to do it directly, but I hate calling ACS like
Mm-hmm.
over truancy or like,
Yep.
or,
What is ACS?
oh, New
Yeah.
York City term, Child Protective Services.
It stands for the Administration for Children's Services.
You work there, Sam?
No, I do not. Let me make
Oh,
that distinction very clear. I work for the Legal Aid Society in the juvenile rights sector. So anytime ACS calls in a case against a parent accusing the kid of neglecting or abusing their kids, I work for the lawyers who are the first line of legal defense, who are assigned by the courts to represent the children.
Okay.
So yeah, we're not the ones who go into the family. We're not the ones who like do the investigation and grab the kids. We're the ones who, when the kids get grabbed, if they're removed from home, that we talk to the kids and we're like, so how do you feel about what's happening and what do you want to have happened? What do you want to have happen? So
And
yeah.
I absolutely, it makes me feel wretched to have to call, or the thought of ever having to call, or
Yep.
even having to report like potential truancy to the counselors to handle.
Especially, I hear you, especially when the kids are teenagers, because when the kids are 15 or 16, how are the parents literally going to force the kids to go to school? They can't.
And it's not only that, like, I just feel guilty because I feel like half the time there's like underlying socioeconomic reasons for why, like, maybe a kid doesn't have clean clothes, or a kid like, or whatever. Like, I used to have a horrible time. I used to hate, in my old school, I worked at a school with uniforms, and I used to hate being required to crack down on uniform policy because I was teaching in an area with a lot of poverty, and I'm thinking, like, you know, well, what if the parents couldn't afford the uniform shirt, or what if, like, you know, they can't afford the laundromat till they get paid, or the elevator's broken in their building and they can't get down to the washing machine, so the kid couldn't wear his uniform today. Like, those kinds of things always used to get me. But those are some of the kinds of things that they tell you to report to ACS for fear of, like,
Mm-hmm.
and if you don't, you fear that you're going to lose your job. And the reason why I say that comes back around, like, to Kamala Harris was that some of the people who I believe unfairly got put in jail under her watch was because of her trying to enact truancy laws. And
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like that's such a mixed bag, because like you said, Sam, you can't control like your 15 or 16-year-old kid going to school. Like, I know my kids. You send them half the time I see them hanging out on Jamaica Avenue, and then they never show up to school because they tell their parents they're going to school, and then they just don't bother. They go hang out with their friends all day, and the parents are none the wiser. But
That's not good. That's not good for the kids or the parents, though.
oh, no, it's not. And I yell at the kids constantly. Like, if I see them hanging out on Jamaica Ave while I'm walking into the building, I tell them, I see you, get your ass to school. But, like, and, like, we call the parents if that happens. Like,
Good.
it's not like we just let it go. I'm just saying that it happens.
Yeah,
But, like,
of course.
but I think that, like, that's kind of like a mixed bag, because, you know, not finishing, like, because I can't, if a kid's not there, I can't teach them anything. But at the same time, is it really fair to, like, punish the parent because for their kid not being, you feel what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yep. I do. So, to bring this back around to Kamala Harris, because it's 1 a.m. and I got to go to bed. Yeah. She's the most high profile of the candidates, who fits the optics that they want, that they're trying to choose. The DNC is trying to choose for Biden. And
And the optics are black woman.
Yeah, woman of color. I would, non-white female.
Okay.
Yes, that's
Okay.
what I mean, they're literally, I think they literally said that recently.
Opposite
Like, they
of
are,
person running for president.
yes, but they also said that literally, like, when somebody was asking the vice president's team about who they were considering, they said they were literally looking at 5 or 6 women of color. So this was, like, I think within the past, like, 3 weeks, this was said.
Wow, so we got into this point where marginalized people are political bargaining. like
yeah.
Say
I
this is
know.
Well, I do want to speak, like, you know, like, across the cynicism for a second, and not to say that it has to do with the ultimate reason why the choice is going to be made, but I mean, I think that there is a chance or a choice to, like, have another viewpoint up there, and there is, like, this realization that, like, you know, it's always been, like, white men leading this country, so, like, the opportunity to make a conscious decision to, like, have another viewpoint up there is something that they're looking at. You know, that it's hopefully it's not just about optics, but they are trying to get like representation. You know.
Well, yeah. Well, yes, of course. But when you're framing it literally in that way, it's literally then, like, you know, but when that's the way you're framing it, it's literally
That's
like
tokenism.
it is. It's tokenism. So,
well, but what if like, out of the people that are qualified, you know, there are plenty of women of color, so, like, that's who they're looking at. In other words,
sure.
like,
Yeah.
How is that any different than affirmative action? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
well,
first of all, affirmative
it's
action is a
different.
good
It's
thing.
different.
Well, first of all, I mean, affirmative action is a good thing.
It's
Second of
different.
all,
Affirmative
So
action.
that's what I'm saying. I agree with affirmative action. Like, all other things being equal, would you, like, isn't it the same thing as affirmative action to pick a woman of color over a white man?
So I think
Yeah.
it's the same. I think it's the same coin we're describing here, but there's just two sides. Like Mike's side, what Mike is saying is one side of the coin, and tokenism is absolutely the other side of the coin, and they're both on the coin.
Mm-hmm.
They're not. It's not one or the other. Like what? They're not both off the table. They're both on the table.
Yes. And I'm
Sometimes
not even,
it is what it
sorry.
looks like. Just to say, sometimes it absolutely is what it looks like, and there is an altruistic reason for it.
Yep.
You see what I'm saying? But
Mhm.
nonetheless, it's still what it looks like.
Right. And no, and just to say that, I'm not saying that these women are not qualified for the position at all. But couching it in those terms does make it look that way. And so that is one thing. And then the other thing is that, the reason that I'm troubled by the pick of Harris is because, again, these are the same qualities that ultimately led to her own undoing in the presidential run. And so it's not like she's changed in the last 6 months. Maybe she has, but not in the grand sense on a public scale that we've all seen. And while I'll
You mean
admit,
her past, or
yeah,
her
well,
past?
or in general, like the person that, or at least the person she is now. Do you know what I mean? Like the issues that she has from the past that made everybody uncomfortable about her, like they still exist. And even though she's changed, and even though she seems to have changed, and I'm willing to, again, like Ish said, I'm not giving her the benefit of the doubt, but I am keeping an open mind.
Yeah.
However, I'll also say that I think she'd make a fine attorney general, because quite frankly, when she interrogates people, honestly, I get a little turned on. But
So now we know
however,
what you do at night, Sam.
yeah, I
Watch Kamala Harris.
Yeah, I watch Kamala Harris grilling Republicans. That's what I do. That's my kink. All right, but however, I will also say that those things still give me pause, and I think it would give a lot of people pause as to why he would end up picking her as his VP when there are other choices out there. She's the highest profile. She has the highest profile amongst that group, but she's not the only person there. And I think it would do the Biden camp well to think long and hard about picking her.
Yeah.
That's what
So,
she said. Sorry, I just had to insert some levity into this serious conversation.
No, that's okay. Listen, I mean,
So what's the timeline? Like, how close to the election or to the nomination do we have? Pretty soon he's going to go into a debate with
yeah.
Donald Trump.
Oh God, can you imagine? I hope they never have to do that. That's seriously, getting the two of them in a debate is going to be it's going to make everyone's heads explode. How do you get through that without drinking 5 bottles of Hennessy?
Well, the idea has been put out there that Biden doesn't want to have it. That's just some of the stuff that I came across today on the social media.
Here's the thing is, I think that
they could have conducted a debate through Zoom by now.
Yes, but here's my thing. My guess is that Biden would not want to debate in person because of COVID, because he at least has that much common sense.
And it's convenient.
And it's convenient, but yes, you could have a debate by Zoom, but the other side, Trump is gonna stomp his foot and refuse to debate on Zoom because he wants everybody looking at him in person.
Well, I just, the sound bites that are going to come from a debate between Biden and Trump.
Oh God.
See, I just want to see, I'm looking forward to the idea of Harris and Pence debating them. That might be some fodder for you at night, Sam.
Mm-hmm.
Harrison Pence.
Yeah.
Mhm.
She doesn't really acquit herself well in that type of environment, and it's interesting because of how well
No
she
pun
acquits herself.
intended.
It's interesting because of how well she acquits herself as a prosecutor, but she certainly doesn't really hold up well.
In debates.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it depends. Yeah.
And,
Yeah, it's true. I feel like it
I
depends
guess
on
she had her
who.
moments, right? She had some moments in the debates.
She had some moments. Yeah, her biggest moment was going after Biden.
Right.
Like, do you know what I mean? But listen, politics makes strange bedfellows.
Yeah, they
So-
just buried the hatchet.
Speaking of which, you
Whose
hear
orifice
that,
do you think they buried it in?
Somebody's butt.
Speaking of which, you hear that Eamon Bundy is like down with BLM now.
Stopped clock.
What's that?
The stopped clock
Stopped
is right
clock.
twice a day.
Oh yeah,
Who's Eamon Bundy?
he's the guy who had the standoff with the U.S. Like a few years ago, like him and his buddies on a ranch.
Oh,
You
at
know,
the little federal building.
With
Yeah.
the militia, I guess
Yeah.
like the militia guys, and it was like, what was it, like a 21-day standoff until they finally got in there. And I always said, if militias got together with black folks who were seeking freedom, maybe they'd be able to help protect us, because they never seem to get shot, even though they're always like threatening, the police and government with guns. So maybe this could be the start of a good, coalition or friendship.
Yeah, and the owner of Chick-fil-A recently was just like, Christians need to do better in their treatment of black people.
Who? Christian
The
what?
owner of Chick-fil-A just came out and said like that Christians need to do better in their treatment of black people.
That's interesting.
Yeah, but they still hate gays. So what are you gonna do?
Yeah, that's my problem with Chick-fil-A.
Like, you know what I mean? So yeah.
But now I want to bring up an interesting point. Like some of the things that I guess some of the unintended consequences that have been caused in some cases, not all, by trying to address societal issues through the judicial system. Like, how can those issues be better addressed? Like a big example, like what I think is like what I'm interested in knowing, like especially in my position as a teacher, is things like, arresting parents for truancy, like sending ACS in if the kids don't come to school. I think those practices were put in place to address like the problem of kids not going to school and not graduating and whatever, not being able to fully participate in capitalism, I guess. But like, I think just to brainstorm, like what would be, like, as I want to know, curiosity as a teacher, like what are some of the root causes of something like skipping school that could be better addressed or alternatively handled?
I mean, you're probably going to have to go deep. I mean, there's
It's
always
boring.
poverty, and
People have better things to do with their time.
there's
Or they
always
think they do.
Yeah.
Well, but here's
some kids
like-
aren't different.
well, the
High
thing
school
is,
is kind of a waste of time.
I'm going to throw this out there, like, that like some of the things you've said before, Ish, you remind, like 25 years ago, or 30 years ago, whatever, reminds me so much of like some of the students that I have now, where they're so smart, but like, and they come in, they take a test, like I had a kid who only came to school 2 days a week and he blew his final exam out of the water. Like, how do you, like, they're so smart and they pass all their classes, but they show up like maybe 2 times a week. And when we ask them why, they're like what you just said, this is a waste of my time. is what they said basically. And
Yeah,
then the parents are tearing their
the
hair out because they
the
don't want to
av-
get in trouble.
the average bright kid, right, doesn't really need high school as the curriculum is set up now.
I would agree with that.
The average bright kid. I'm not talking about higher learning courses in high school, right? You know, you're consumer. You already have consumer math by the time you graduate elementary school,
Yeah, that's
right?
kind of true. I could run a cash register in 5th grade. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
like you have consumer math, and you know you really, I mean, and I'm not hating on education because I'm a fan of education. Like I loved history. Do I need history?
or it's like what one of my other kids said. Like, do I really need to? I one time I said to like the kid came in and wanted to sit in my classroom in lieu of going to geometry. I said to him, I'm like, dude, go to geometry. Get out. I already saw you. Go away. And he says, but Miss P, do I really need to know how to like graph 3 and on the x-axis and -2 on the y-axis? Like, when am I going to need to use this in real life? And I just hear like a lot of that, and I think that's the reason why kids think school is useless.
Well, I've been reading some articles that some other teacher friends of mine have been posting during lockdown, and they've been actually questioning education as we know it today because of lockdown. And some of the questions they've been asking are, you know, why do kids need to learn A, B, C, and D in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 time periods? Meaning, why do we need to learn all of this in this order in this period of time? What's the purpose of it?
Like, what's
Why
the
is
purpose of who decides what's important and what
right
order to put it in?
and what time period it has to be done in? And you know, they've been kind of evaluating, you know, again, we had this conversation kind of briefly a couple weeks ago, you know, about what our educational system is based on. Obviously, it's meant to push capitalism, like you said earlier, and you know, and whatever is driving capitalism currently is the products we're trying to produce. You know, people that can go right into that, whatever it is, be it computer science, be it what have you. But the problem is, a lot of these fields, right? Like I would say, guesstimation, like 80% of most people who graduate high school aren't going to go into these fields. And if they are going to go into these fields, it's not going to be because of what they learned in high school, even if they learned it. It's going to be because at some point in time, they went back to school, right? They went back, they either went to college after high school or they didn't, and then they went back to school after, you know, getting some years of life experience, and then they decide to go into these fields. So I think, me personally, you know, I love history, and that's why I mentioned history when I said, do I really need it? Yes, I should have a basic understanding of my history, for sure. Do I really need history if I'm not going to become a history teacher or a historian? You understand what I'm saying? Like, do
Well, I felt the same way about economics. Anyways, continue.
I mean, there are so many things. Yeah, obviously you need basic math, right? You should probably be taking English for at least 3 years. Higher learn people, like I didn't take English my senior year. You know,
But
people who
even
are
English, like like I don't think that like English is really like a skill-based class much more than anything else. Like I had a teacher who took great liberties and like what she picked in the books she picked for us to read in class, and still had us like follow the standards, still had us write like until our hands fell off argumentative essays or whatever the hell it was. But we read, but she kind of like just glossed through like Shakespeare and the Canterbury Tales and went straight to like Lord of the Flies and To Kill a Mockingbird and like
I mean,
every.
I certainly think that English syllabuses should be based upon, you know, teacher's choice. Like I don't think there should be a standard where you got to read Shakespeare or
But
you
the
got to
point is,
read.
that's what I was gonna say. She constantly like when we were doing Shakespeare, she constantly complained about having to teach it. because
Yeah, I
she,
just wouldn't have taught it.
yeah, well, I guess she didn't want to get fired, but like she could have gotten away with it. She got away with a lot more. But I think that like the point I was going to make out of that is like I don't think I was severely hampered because we only spent 3 weeks on Macbeth.
I mean, I think everyone currently in this Zoom, based upon what I know of you and my interactions with you, could go to high school for 2 days a week. And while we might not have a 90 average, we're going to pass.
Yeah, I would be willing to guess that. I'd be
I'm-
willing. I'd make that wager too.
I mean,
I would.
yeah, you're probably right because like I didn't miss school, but I also did have above a 90 average in most cases.
I didn't, but not because I couldn't. I just didn't go to school. I showed up to take tests. You know what I mean? I did all of my quarter projects in the last quarter.
Mm.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. Like, I think in hindsight, I was too scared not to like follow the prescribed rules of society. You know, you go to school, you do your homework, you don't cut class, blah blah blah. Like,
I was afraid to fail.
I was
Me
afraid.
too.
I was afraid to fail, but the funny thing is, actually failing a class just didn't seem that plausible in my case because my grades never got that borderline. Like to me, getting an 89 was failing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was just so like pressed into like, and not only when it came to school, like I was just so like rule adherent, I guess, at that time. I wouldn't have done this, but I probably could have like still kept like a B or a C average and gone to school twice a week and just like stayed home and slept and watched The Price is Right the rest of the week.
So I think while there's no easy answer to your question, I think an answer, at least to start, is something that we touched on before. Like you got to streamline what you're going to teach in high school, right? It should be a mix of the fundamental things that you need and life preparatory things. And if you're plan to go to college, then obviously you should be able to enroll in courses that prepare you to go to college. But if you don't, if your immediate plan out of high school isn't to go to college, then the general studies should be life preparatory things with a good mix of obviously basics. You know, your
Yep.
English, there's your maths, and then the rest should be
Like
things that
balancing
prepare
a
you for life.
checkbook, making
Yes.
a budget, things like that.
Things like that. And you know, you actually, you know, have classes, you know, like, you know, maybe industry or something where you take on career roles and you have to manage, or you see what I'm saying? Things like that prepare you for life.
Like
And I
soft
think,
skills, you mean?
right, I think those things will encourage people to be in school.
Sometimes I seriously think, and this is just a side note, sometimes I seriously think everybody in the US should have to work a retail job to finish high school just so that they learn not to treat retail workers and customer service workers with such contempt. Because I think, yeah, good, no, because I think like people legit like curse retail workers out, like if they're out of like something, or like do things like that because they just don't understand what it's like to run a business.
Well, I mean, I think, and this might be a bias because I grew up in that type of environment, and on top of which I married someone who maintains that type of environment. I think that everybody should be able to do their own taxes.
I do mine.
I mean,
don't.
I don't have a I'm not. That's not a knock on you, Sam.
That's okay.
Again,
No, I didn't think that it was.
Oh, okay. I was about to say. Again, it's a bias for me in the sense that,
I think it's good to know how to do your own taxes, but I happen to have some investments, and I don't know how to.
Oh yeah.
So,
well, I mean,
my mom my mom always did her taxes. So I was raised in that environment, and I'm married to an accountant.
Yeah,
Well,
So
that
it's,
helps.
yes,
yeah.
exactly.
And you know,
Yeah.
now that I know that, if you want, I can throw her some business. But
But I think like you
just
like
saying,
you know
Huh.
in that case being married to like
gotta look out for your friends, right?
you're
Oh
right.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, in that case, like being married to like saying that you're gonna go out and ask somebody else to do your taxes is like me, and admittedly I do this anyways sometimes just because of availability and people being available and whatnot, but it's like me when I use the translation line to call a parent who speaks Spanish when I could just have Misha do it.
Right. Well, I haven't seen a tax return since I was in the military.
But
I
to
don't even
speak to
I don't
but
even
to
know what the tax forms look like anymore.
but to speak to that, well, I don't think Misha does either. But but to speak to that though, like I'm like I didn't learn that kind of stuff. You've got a point though, because I know how to do like a lot of that stuff, like my taxes, like balance a checkbook, like et cetera, et cetera. Like I know how to do like these adulting kinds of things, like but
Well, with the exception of the investments, Sam,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I just talked to you, so I already know your level of intellect. With the exception of the investments, you could do your own taxes, but you have the investments. If
Yes.
say you didn't, like literally, you just follow the book.
Yes.
Literally,
Yes.
you know what I mean? You just
you just
read the manual and follow the, you
Yes.
know what I mean?
you just write
Yes, I
number
do.
you just write number A into slot B. But like
Yes.
I think like I learned how to do all of these things, like, taxes, balancing a checkbook. Not that we use checkbooks anymore. Like things like that, I learned from my dad because he did them all.
It sounds like New York is happening in the headphones.
Not me, but it's not here. But like I learned to do all of those like life skills things because because my dad taught me, not because I learned them in school. And not
Mm-hmm.
Right.
everybody is so lucky to like grow up in that kind of environment. And my dad taught me these things and did not teach my mom, and now she's practically acting helpless half the time because he did everything for her, and she's 60 some years old and has no bloody clue how to fill out a tax form herself.
Sorry to hear
Yeah.
that.
I think one of the most important things I learned in school was how to mail a letter, and that was in elementary school.
What's a letter?
Meh.
It's a
Like-
letter.
But no, that's true though. Like I remember when I was in elementary school, there was this one day, I'll never forget it. The librarian, they had just gotten a new computer in the library, and of course it was one of those huge big ass like PCs with like the beige that looks like a beige box, like, you know what I'm talking about.
Mm.
And they had plugged like one of the screechy modems into it and hooked it up to like the library like the phone extension for the library. And the librarian was just like, started the library class, like the teacher dropped us off at the librarian started the class, held up the modem and said, "Oh, guess what? So we're going to do something really exciting today in class. Come, let me show you. We're going to use the phone lines so that this computer could talk to another computer in a different place."
Yeah. Wow.
And it makes me just laugh now because like
Those are the days, huh?
because I feel like, if you said that like today, like kids would laugh in your face and be like, yeah, that's what our
Yeah.
phones do, stupid.
One of the courses I had to take in my first year in college was Computer 101. I don't even know that that's a course anymore. If it is, it shouldn't be. But literally, it was at the time I was working tech support at an online internet company, and it was literally like being in kindergarten, but having the brains of a 23-year-old man with all the life experiences, but just having to take kindergarten class. Like literally, it was the easiest class I've ever taken.
That's how I felt in Microsoft Word professional development. Anyways, go on.
I mean, literally, it was, this is a mouse. This is Windows. You know what I mean? This is this. You have RAM and random access memory, like these things that are just, every kid could tell you now.
Don't laugh. Old people don't know how to turn a computer on. We're lucky we got Misha's. We're lucky we got Misha's mom to figure out how to use an iPad.
And it's funny that you say that, right? Because, I look at kids and I look at the theory of 100 monkey syndrome and how people pick things up. And like my goddaughter / niece is, she's about to turn 2. And she runs around with my wife's iPad. I mean, obviously she can't type in the password, but she can go to the app that she likes to go to. She can, open it up and literally play the games, close out the game, open another game. You know what I mean? And I'm like, she doesn't speak. She doesn't speak much, and yet she's adept at using, an iPad. You know what I mean? And it's like,
yes.
Well, one of my friend's kids, I saw he was 8 years old or something. Like a couple years back, he was reading an actual old-fashioned paperback book, and yes, they actually make books still.
I still read them.
But anyways, he was trying to swipe his fingers across the page to try to zoom in to make the letters bigger, and wasn't understanding why it was looking all bewildered, why am I doing this, and why am I swiping and not, and the letters aren't moving and they're not getting bigger.
I could see this in a sci-fi movie where some guy finds himself in the past. He picks up the book not knowing what it is and just tries to enlarge the words with his fingers.
I'm pretty sure that already was a movie.
Was it?
I'm based on your description of but yeah.
Oh, hey.
It's
I'm just teasing. I have no idea.
Wait, no.
It sounds like it easily could be. I think that was your point.
It's like if the Yip Yip
Speaking of which, though,
came here.
I was saying to Flav just yesterday that I'm anxious for another one of your movie blocks.
What?
I was just saying to Flav yesterday that I'm anxious for another one of your movie review blocks.
Thank you.
Your services are being requested.
That's awesome. Thank you, Ish. Actually, I just spoke with a friend today about having him help me design it, because I'm visualizing it. The thought of actually personalizing it with my own photos, I get anxious just thinking about it, because I don't know how to do it, and taking the time I feel would be overwhelming. But I have all of the. I'm good with words, though. That's what I'm good with. And so he offered to help me set it up. He's offering to help me do it. So I'm hoping that.
Was this Rob that's offering to help you?
It was indeed. And yeah, so thank you, Ish. I appreciate that. I am very much looking forward to posting more on that subject. And when it comes out, I will share the link on Facebook and I will promote it. And speaking of which, on the subject of guilty pleasures, quote unquote, I have been spending this entire summer rewatching Melrose Place, and I don't feel guilty about it at all. So there you have it.
Wasn't Guilty Pleasures 2 hours ago?
All right, guys, I'm going to get out. I'm a bit past due.
Me too.
I've been tired for a while.
It is a perfect
Okay, guys.
pleasure. This was such a delightful conversation with all of you.
Yeah, it was cool. I appreciate it.
It's been a real pleasure, not a guilty one.
Yes.
Yeah, the
it
yelling
has
is
been
going
a
to be
real
classic.
pleasure.
Yelling's
It's
going to go down
classic.
as classic.
Good night, my friends.
In all fairness, my yelling was cathartic.
Yeah.